It's Jennifer J. Hammond, and I'm so excited. We have Carlamay here. And boy, do I have she was a police officer. She is a mom. She's been so many things, and I can't wait to have you dive into a topic you probably haven't thought about in real estate. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Well, thank you, because we are going to talk about, I think, so often the forgotten ones, the children in the process of buying and selling. And even with, I want to say, the real estate agents themselves, so often they keep talking to all the adults. And the children just sometimes get kind of forgotten in the process of real estate. So let's talk about, how do we involve the children?
Well, that's a wonderful question and a huge question because I think that many times, like you said, kids are just forgotten and parents don't mean to do that, but there's so much going on and parents want to make sure they get the right house, the perfect house, and they forget to ask the kids, how will it feel if you're moving away from your friends or moving into a new community or even going to a new school? What's going through your head at this time? And that also can start leading to the children or the youth starting to shut down. And so then you start losing that connection with the kids and you move into this new beautiful home and you don't understand why all of a sudden that connection's not there anymore.
Right. And interesting that you say that, because I think one of the interesting things, I worked with a lot of relocation people who are relocating due to their work. They work for a big corporation and they were getting, and so similar to military, they got used to relocating all the time. And one of the, there was a couple of families you could tell that had relocated a lot because they sat down with the kids. We all went out looking at property together first. Number one, that was so important. But number two, they also involved the kids in the conversation with me. And they asked the kids, "Do you have any questions for Jennifer?" And I was like, "Oh, I was the first time that I was like, oh," and I mean, they were of varying ages. It wasn't like they were all teenagers. But also, one of the families that I worked with, I thought was fascinating. They had two boys that loved to play football. And so what they did is they found the school district that had the football team that they wanted to be in. And then they gave me, okay, we're only going to buy a house in this school district. But they were so excited. The kids were so excited because they knew where their school was going to be. So they kind of had the anchor. And then they had the thing that they loved, which was a sport, football. And so
Yeah.
they knew where the practice field was going to be. They'd already met with the coach before we went out to look at. I was like, whoa, I was just so blown away, because my parents never did that for me. And I had never seen parents ever include children in the process, to the point where literally they weren't buying a house if the kids didn't say yes.
That's amazing. And I think I grew up with children are seen and not heard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think many times that kind of falls into all sorts of areas. One of the ways I really saw this, so as a police officer, I worked in the high schools and I worked for 8.5 years and we were called school resource officers. And I would see when the newcomers would come to the school, many of these youth that would come with their parents, never mind had they only come out of maybe war-torn countries, refugee camps. So they're being plopped into an area they know nothing about. But we also didn't realize that they had moved from someplace else. Like I'm in Canada. So they had moved already from someplace else, maybe a year ago. So they never really even got a feel of their place a year ago, and now they're being dropped into a new location. And so when you sat down and talked to these youth, they all they wanted to do was feel like they belonged someplace and that they could have friends and that they felt valued. And that's so huge because no matter if it's real estate or even just talking with our youth, that's what they want. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. So it's so important.
And I know that you have some of this, the key to this success, I think, is communicating with the right questions, and also being aware when you're not getting real answers. You're getting kind of, they're telling you what you want to hear, not
Mhm.
actually being honest and telling you the truth, right?
Yes, and that happens so often. And as parents, we know our kids. Sometimes we don't feel we do, but deep down, we know them. And so when we're getting some of those answers, even just being aware of, the temperament, the behavior, the disposition of our child, of how they're answering it. Man, it tells a lot.
And also, in some ways, I think it's so important. I do this with clients, but I've also found that with children, I have to say, I have to repeat it as well, is that it's okay to disagree with me, and it's okay to communicate that,
Mm.
like I always am known for my yay happy attitude, and yet I have had more than one of my clients go, no, today is not a yay day. And I'm like, oh, okay, help me understand what you're feeling, what you're viewing, what you're, seeing in this situation, because I'm seeing it as, we had success here. And so there's a yay. And just being able to give someone permission
Mhm.
to not be, I want to say, just stuck on being polite instead of being honest.
Well, and not being okay, and that is okay, and I think over the last few years, people have been afraid to give their opinions.
Oh
But
yeah.
having an opinion, that makes you who you are, and you're allowed to be able to voice. And again, children are seen and not heard. But yet, if you give your kids a choice, you can still have the boundaries, of saying, hey, we're moving to this area. It's like the boundaries that you get, we're moving to this area. This is what we're looking for in a house. Well, you can do that with the kids as well, but give them a choice in there, then that way you've had the boundaries are still set, but they have a say. And it's okay for them to not agree with you. And when this reminds me of a story actually of a young girl that came in, and she was really struggling at school, and nobody really had they didn't know how to talk with her. She was very quiet. So I ran into her one day in the hall and just asked her if she would come and have a chat in the office. And we sat down and started chatting, and she just broke down in tears. And I guess what had happened is her parents had just gotten divorced. And so both sets had to move because they could not afford the matrimonial home. And so she was now not only leaving what normal was, but she was going to two very different worlds all of a sudden. And so, of course, I think her parents were struggling, of course, with the divorce plus having to move, but nobody had sat down with her to talk with her, not only about the move, but about the divorce as well. So she was able to just, communicate about how she was feeling, what was going on, what she agreed and didn't agree with, because I was kind of a neutral ground.
Right. Yeah.
And I asked her if I'd be able to bring her parents in to have a chat and if both of them could come in at, the same time.
Yeah.
And they were civil, and they both came in. And, her dad actually had tears in his eyes because he had not even thought to bring her into the talk of how she was feeling, what was going on, because he was so entrenched in his emotions and what was happening to him and her mom. So I thought something even like that can change the way a child or a youth feels, thinks, how they handle their days, how they get up in the morning, things like that.
Well, I think that's such a good one. You talk about divorce, and I'm also going to take it. Well, first of all, I think it's so important when the divorce is happening. So often, as a real estate professional, I'm the first person they call before they even tell their family. And
Yeah.
and it's such a weird feeling because I'm like, oh gosh. And again, I've watched when the children are not involved and asking permission. Can we involve the children? Have you talked to the children? How do the children feel about this? Again, it's very similar. If you're not going to be able to keep the home they had, and now we need two smaller homes, are they going to be homes that are close to each other? Are the kids going to be able to take bikes back and forth if they have a bedroom at each, at mom's house and at dad's house, two different ones? And how does that, how does that end up being part of their daily life as far as
Mhm.
their best friends? Who do they spend the night with, or who do they hang out with? But also their sports and where they go. And again, asking those questions. And I think also divorce is one of, but also like I talked about relocation. So often whoever the primary parent is, it could be the woman or it could be the man, is so caught up in what the corporation is having them do. And they're usually being promoted. So now there's a whole new job and a whole new training, and it's on back burner to talk to the kids about, okay, now I'm going to be even working more hours, or now I'm going to be working a totally different job where I'm going to travel a lot, and there's just so many conversations that don't have. So divorce, a big change, like a job change, but then also the other one is death. I see
Mhm.
so often when there's a major transition and it's either a family member dies and they have to sell a house, or all the reasons that you end up doing around death for a new place to live. And so often in that emotional whirlwind, I've seen the kids just often are never asked how they feel about the situation or what's happening, to make sure that they can also heal in that
Mhm.
situation. Do you have
That's
any stories?
well, just kind of thinking back, the death, not I didn't have to deal with death for relocating or that thing talking with the kids. But I mean, divorce is a big one. And then of course relocation, or even we had, so I'm in Canada, and in 2013 we had floods here, and like it had been 100 years since anything like this had happened. And I lived up in an area where everybody just kind of went home. Nobody even knew what was going on if you were not working within the floodplains. And as a school resource officer, we all got called out of the schools on that day, and I'll never forget it. And we were called to our meeting point, and the meeting point that we ended up being called into, which was our Saddle Dome, where the Flames, Calgary Flames, play. And by the time we got there, the basement had flooded out, so we couldn't even meet in our musker point. So
Mm.
just going through all of that and then going back into the schools after this flood happened, where people were living in a hotel, still paying a mortgage on a home that was no longer in existence, trying to deal with insurance, trying to put food on the table. And the schools that I was at the time, we had a number of families who went to the food bank, was one of the main sources. Well, with our food bank, you only have a certain number of times that you can attend there. So
Mm.
once you've used up those times, you can't go back. So at the school, we started working with families, and because the kids would come in and you knew they were not doing okay, but they did not want to pose a burden on their parents because their parents were trying to work, trying to figure stuff out. So just sitting and, talking with the kids, letting them be able to talk what was going on, living in a hotel. Some of them, there was a few that were living in their vehicles, like with their parents in their cars, because they couldn't afford to go get a hotel at the time. Because they were still paying a mortgage, right? Couldn't get food. So being able to work with the kids from that side, getting some counselors and stuff involved, but then being able to work with the families and, getting some food for them, getting them, the kids could come and shower at the school in the morning and have food for them at the school. It was one of these where you start thinking outside of the box, because when normal is not normal,
Yep.
or what we deem as normal is not normal anymore, you've got to put some kind of normalcy into these kids' lives.
Yep, I agree.
You
And
know?
thank you for sharing that with the floods. I think also the fires in California have, again, so often the children are overlooked in like a school is all of a sudden destroyed, and now, not only the homes, but the schools. And in Florida, we had two back-to-back hurricanes this last year. And
Yes.
right now it's not being discussed, but it's the same situation of what you're talking about. People are paying a mortgage on a house they can't live in. And so they're either living with family, they're living in a car. And again, the children are so often, the conversation is not being had, and we're not looking at how is that impacting, because people are in such survival mode in real estate. They don't want to, and prideful. And I want to say,
Mhm.
because they are so afraid. I used to love on the radio when I was on Sirius XM. I used to tell people, you can call and you can tell me, you can lie to me about what your name is. Just call and ask me the question you really want to ask.
Yeah.
Because so often people are afraid. And I've been there too. And I think it's part of the reason I used to say it is, a question you think you should know the answer to, whether it's financial literacy or just, a real estate question or whatever it is, or even if it's a tax question or a legal question that you think you should know the answer to, and just ask it, and just let's figure out how we can have a communication and a real communication. And again, so often with children, if you actually open the door and ask them the questions, they will talk. They will.
Yes. Sometimes they are just yearning for somebody just to take that time. And all it takes is, a minute to ask how they're doing, but to really ask how they're doing, not just the fine, good, those one answer questions. I One of the things that it just kind of came through me as you were talking too is that so many, not a lot, but there are still a number of parents who feel that the kids don't have a say,
Yeah.
right? That it's either old school or the way we were brought up, that kind of stuff. And if that's how the parents are, I mean, I'm not putting anything against them with that, but looking at how some of the parents are, because I look back growing up, I mean, you as kids, you were just quiet,
Yep.
right? You just did as you were told. And now I have a 16-year-old and, I have to give him options or else I'm going to have this kid who's just like, I'm not doing anything,
Yeah.
right? Why you can't force me to do anything. And I would rather have him say, you know what, mom, I'm going to do this. And thank you for giving me those options. Or
Yeah.
I don't like either of them. What about this one? But he's thinking outside of the box.
I know you have from silence to trust 3 ways to create spaces for children to speak their truth. Will you talk about those?
Yeah, so the number one is creating a safe space. So, whatever that looks like, because every child is so different and every family and household is different. So, that could mean even going down and asking your child if they can teach you to game. And I roll my eyes because I hate gaming, but you know what? That 10 minutes that you spend with your child, even if you're not really talking, it breaks down a barrier because now your child feels heard and seen and that they're valued and that the time that you spend with them is valued.
Yeah.
One of the things too is learn what your child's love language is because we make assumptions that, well, if I give them gifts, everything's going to be okay. But all that they want is you off your phone, and spending time sitting and talking with them for quality time. That's all they want. There is a quiz, and it's specifically love languages for teens. So
Uh,
that's something that is so neat to find out. Another one, active listening and no judgment. There's many
yes.
times I've had to tell parents literally just shut up and listen, but actually listen because I do this sometimes, I'm guilty, but we already have in our head what we're going to say to the kid and actually don't hear that they don't want something said.
Yeah.
They just want to be heard what they're going to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are kind of 3, 4 things that are just kind of even just to start that communication, that process, so the kids actually feel valued and heard.
Yeah, I think one of the secrets in what you just said, I think so important, is just not evaluating and invalidating the poor child before, and especially because you're ready with your to pounce on them with whatever, you know, whether it's criticism or whether it's, I know better than you because I'm older and wiser. I mean, there's so many things where if you just listen to their point of view, again, you might be surprised on what you learn,
Yes.
you just open, and you said active listening. I think that's so, so important. And their love language. I love that too, because so often, again, everybody's different on what they like and what they don't. And it's so funny when you said that, reminded me as a real estate agent, one of the first things I learned. So I've been doing this now 28 years. And I remember when I first got in, I was like, oh, okay. So I had come from as a paralegal. So I'd been in the legal. So I was again, time was very finite. And, for 15 minutes, you're charged an enormous amount of money. So I always was trying to be super efficient with people, again, thinking that that was the way they wanted to be treated. And one of the things that I learned from the hard knocks was that not everybody likes to be communicated with in the same way, just like what's their love language. So some people prefer a text message. Some
Yeah.
people prefer a voicemail. Some people prefer you just pick up the phone and call until you actually get a real person. Some people prefer you just put it in my, 3,000 emails and I'll get to it whenever I get to it. But everybody's different on how and I've been yelled at for all sorts of, why did you text message me? I don't want a text message. Why don't you just pick up the phone? And then I've been yelled at for, don't leave me a voicemail. I never listen to my voicemail. I'm like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
I've learned you just have to start, you have to ask, how do
Yes.
we communicate? Ask
Yeah.
what the love language is, ask and just find it out. And even if you cringe a little bit because that's not yours, not your love language, or that's not how you prefer to communicate, listen.
Yeah. Well, and what you will get out of it is priceless. And that's the thing, even you've probably found with your clients, all of a sudden you hear what they're actually saying and you use that, and my goodness, stuff opens up like you would not believe.
Well, I have to tell one quick one story I thought was so funny. You made me think about is also, I remember this one time I had a whole family and they were 3 kids and they were all pretty young. They were all under the age of 10. So they said, we're going to have everybody in our car and we'll just follow you. And I said, okay. And then it was funny. She looked at me and then she was like, why don't you just ride with us? There's lots of crackers and stickiness. And do you mind just riding with us? I'm like, no, I don't mind at all. And I had brought the 3 kids a little toy. And I said, okay, now we're all going to play a game today. And they were like, what kind of game? And I said, well, every house we go to, you get to rate it. Do you love it? Do you not? And I remember the parents were like, what are you like? And it was so funny because at the end of the day, I gave each one of my love $2 bills. I gave each one of them a $2 bill for participating and giving me their real feedback. And they're super honest.
Yeah.
What they like and what they don't like specifically.
Yep.
Again, for me it was really good feedback because again, adults so often have that, they're trying to be polite and they're not telling me this house smells like cat and we're allergic, or this house, is too dark, and they're trying to be polite about the house. And I'm like, I just need to know, because if it's not even a contender, let's get it off the list. And
Yep.
the kids are right away like, yeah, I hate this house. This blah blah. And you're like, thank you.
Yes, well, and people, people don't give enough to what the kids have to say. They never, they forget that kids are pretty smart, and kids will tell you exactly what they are feeling and what they think, even if you don't want to hear it sometimes. But sometimes, you know what, you need to hear it.
Exactly. And I think it's just, yeah, again, I'm so glad to have you on the show because I think it's so often I think the secret sauce that we forget. We're all connected, and the children should not be overlooked in buying and selling real estate ever. And it's so important that we communicate so that we feel seen, so that we can actually communicate whether we agree or we don't agree. It doesn't matter. So I
Yeah.
know we're almost out of time. I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you and social media, website, anything you want to share.
Sure. So Carlamay at carlamaysheremata.com is my email address. www.carlamaysheremata.com website. I have a book, Youth Truth. It's on Amazon and Ingram Sparks as well, and it goes through a bunch of the stuff. And LinkedIn under Carlamay Sheremata.
Perfect. And as you know, I'm always looking for that silver lining, and I love the yay. So I'm going to ask you to lift your voice and say yay with me as we go off the air. Is that okay?
I will be there.
Perfect. 3, 2, 1.
Yay!
That was perfect. Thank you.
If you could just help people understand the principles, then they could make better decisions in real estate. We started getting an audience. And so with the radio show, I actually get to help many, many people.
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And if you want more help in getting from where you are to where you want to be, I want to encourage you to listen to the Jennifer Hammond Show